Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to the February 26, 2018 meeting of the Rutherford County Regional Planning Commission. And if I will stand with all of y'all, we'll have our prayer and our pledge. I'll call on Commissioner Rhonda Allen, please.
Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this day and this opportunity that we have to come together and do your business, Lord. We ask for wisdom and discernment in all that we do. Thank you for all the blessings that you've bestowed upon Rutherford County and continue to do so. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. Please face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Call a roll, please, Gail.
Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Jim Aberwater.
Here.
Lee Bogle.
Here.
David Jones.
Here.
Mike Cush.
Present.
Craig Lynch.
Here.
Chip Pinion. Charlotte P.
Here.
Pettis Reed.
Here.
Mike Vaught. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Item number 4 on our agenda is the election of chair and vice chair. For some reason, I think we've already done that.
Yeah, you're right. No, I just wanted to do it again. So.
Okay.
Sorry. Got to take that off.
Hopefully we've got it right the first time, but I'm beginning to have my doubts.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Do we have any minutes to approve, Gail?
Yes. It's December the 17th.
We need to review and approve the minutes of our December 17th meeting, and I'll call on our Vice Chair, Mike Cush.
They all sound good to me. Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of December 17th. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Just for the record, it was the 11th, not the 17th. Just sorry.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Same thing. Okay. Any items that we've had? What's
No, sir.
wrong?
Everything's on.
We're ready to go. Item 7 under new business. 7A, a waiver request. 7A1, the item number is 18-4001. Cynthia Vaughn is requesting a waiver from the fire hydrant requirements for property located along Rocky Fork Road. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and good morning, Commissioners. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the property into a total of 3 tracts. There's a concept plan in your agenda materials. On your iPad, it's the page right after the staff comments that you'll see on there. 2 of the tracts, 1 and 2, are less than 5 acres in size. Lot 3, or tract 3, however you want to say it, would be the remaining acreage and would be accessed via a 50-foot access easement. When this was originally submitted to staff, the applicants were asking for 2 separate waivers. They were looking at a waiver for the minimum lot size on a private easement and the width of a private easement for those 2 lots, the smaller ones. The larger tract, again, being remaining acreage, would be over 5 acres. After reviewing the plans with their surveyor, they determined there is adequate room to do essentially 2 flag lots for lots 1 and 2. They'll both have adequate road frontage, and they'll both have when the flag lot goes down, they both have enough room for that. And there's enough room for a 50-foot access easement to the remaining acreage. So neither of those waivers is necessary. However, after consulting with Consolidated Utility District, it's been determined that a fire hydrant cannot be supported in that area. So now they're asking for the fire hydrant waiver for those 2 parcels, the smaller ones. The one being over 5 acres that'll be accessed off the 50-foot access easement, being an acreage tract, doesn't qualify as a subdivision. So therefore, it wouldn't have to meet that particular regulation. So the applicant is present, Ms. Vaughn, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those, or she would be as well.
Staff recommendation?
Being that they cannot support a hydrant, we'd be fine with it, especially since everything else with it is in order.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve item 18-4001. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7A2, item 18-4002. Sandra Abernathy is requesting a waiver from the minimum 50-foot access easement requirements for property located at 6951 Couchville Pike. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The applicant would like to deed about 5 acres to their son from an existing 22-acre tract. The applicant has also submitted a concept plan with their proposal. You can see that again on the next page after the staff comments on your iPads. This new tract would be landlocked and would require a 50-foot access easement. However, the applicant is asking for the ability to have a 35-foot easement along the western property line, and they're concerned that they wouldn't have enough room for the easement the way that their lot is configured. The applicant is present, and I'm sure they'd like to make some comments about this. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Any questions for staff?
The way it's configured, that's all they can get to 35?
Based on where the driveway is and everything that they want to do, yeah, pretty much. Because if you look on that, you can kind of see where the driveway is in the house, and I don't think they would have enough. At least they don't think they'd have enough doing it that way, unless they were to kind of take the easement around the world to get back to Couchville Pike.
The easement couldn't go over their driveway? I mean,
Oh, it
not
could,
that they
yeah.
have to use it, it's just, but at least it's there.
It could, yes, they could do that. And again, the applicants might be able to do a better job, because we went over some of these different scenarios of things that they could do and not have to ask for a waiver, but I know they've got certain reasons for why they want to do that, so it might be appropriate to bring them up here to talk to them about it.
Did you discuss why a flag lot wouldn't work?
I think it was the same reason, having the driveway on technically not on their property, but on the the other property that they'd be creating. Especially where the driveway was located.
Ms. Abernathy here.
Good morning.
Morning.
So we own, I'm sorry, we own the 22 acres, and then my brother-in-law owns the 22-acre tract next to us. We farm all of that as one large tract. It was passed to us from our in-laws. We have about 36 feet between our driveway and the property line, which is why we're asking for the 15-foot waiver. What we plan to do is, when we are gone, we'll split the property that we have between our two sons, 11 acres and 11 acres. Our younger son would like to probably build next to us along Couchville Pike, so we don't want to tie up the property with an easement affecting the farmland, affecting where he would build, and then that way, when they split the property, it's 11 to one, 11 to another, and nobody's encroaching on anybody else.
So when you do the 11 and 11, your house will be on one of the 11?
Well, I don't know if when we're gone, if they're going to want to like bulldoze the house down or subdivide it out with the third of an acre where our house is to just be a separate lot to come back before this committee at that point. But
The only reason that I ask is because we have to plan for when the property changes hands and it's not within the family. And so my thinking was is that, let's say your existing house stays there, it would be easy for someone to create a driveway on the other side and still allow for that 5-acre lot to be independent and either create a flag lot there with that 50-foot easement, because you don't have to use it. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to use it.
right.
So that's all I'm thinking is how's the property going to transfer in the future? And so I just don't want to have too little access, provided step back to that 5-acre tract.
Well, because that's what we were kind of thinking. We didn't want the 35-foot easement to encroach upon our house. I mean, if something would happen down the road and they would end up getting foreclosed upon, we don't want to be sharing an access with somebody we don't even know, and our thought is, because we do farm it all as one tract and our younger son wants to build next to us, we just kind of wanted to keep everything separate.
Any other questions for the Abernathys?
Doug, in the event that down the road, Ron was talking about the 35-foot, if somebody wanted to come in, put 2 or 3 lots back there, 35 would be out of the question, right?
Well, they would have to, they got the waiver for that, but if they wanted to access additional tracts off of that, they would have to come back here anyway for the additional tracts for platting. Plus, if they were wanting to use the existing 5-acre tract, then you start running into the issue of, well, those tracts, if they want to split that up, would automatically be under 5 acres. So there's a waiver request there. So more than likely, it would have to come back through this body anyway for anything like that, any future re-subdivision of the property.
A buzzer just goes off in my head when I hear the word landlocked. And that was part of the description. So that's all I'm thinking is I'm trying to do a workaround to not have a landlocked property.
Thank you. And now that you guys have heard the Abernathys, any staff comments, Doug, anything that?
I don't have any really thing to add to the discussion.
Okay.
I mean, it's up to the commission. There are ways to make this work without a waiver, but I understand their reasoning at the same time. So.
Okay.
What are the ways to make it work without a waiver?
Well, like I said, I mean, kind of what we were talking about, just because there's a 50-foot access easement doesn't mean they have to use it. They could do a 50-foot access easement through the property and back up to the eastern side. They could do that and not have to have a waiver. But again, you know, understand where they're coming from. Don't want to go through the farm area. And you know, if they were to split off the property in the future, then they have an access. Someone may have access to the property, again, that they don't know. You know, I understand where they're coming from. So, I mean, that's one way. There's probably some others, but that's one way that we talked about.
I'm not 100% sure I understood what you just said. They can
Sorry.
they can request.
If you were to take just because the way they show it on their agenda material, they could actually, they don't have to put the easement right there on the western property line. They could take a 50-foot easement, kind of run to the east and then up to Couchville Pike along the eastern property line as a 50-foot easement out of the way of the driveway and all that. And just because the easement is there, if they still wanted to access the existing driveway back to that property, they could still do that. That'd be between them as a family. They could do that. So that situation would be 5 acres. It would be on a 50-foot access easement, and there wouldn't be a waiver necessary for that.
So we could approve 50 foot on the opposite side of the property, and they could go ahead with their plans to do an access back to it using the existing driveway. Is that what you're saying?
You could do that, yes. If this were to be denied, then they would just have to find another way to do the easement. And still, they could still use their own driveway if they wanted to. Again, that'd be up to them.
Coming from a family with multiple children and a farm, it's hard to plan ahead. And it sounds like they've put some thought into it, and I'm glad their kids are interested in keeping the property. I don't know, you can guess what's going to happen in the future, but you're never going to guess right.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'm showing my age here. I've sat here and gone through a property like this, and I understand the family situation right there. What they're trying to do is keep some farm property within the family. And we're losing so much farm property across this county anyway. And I understand we got other ways to fix this, we got other ways to do it, but yet you've got a family that's come in here and they've already made their decision what they want to do with it. And I'm gonna make the motion to go ahead with what they're wanting to do because of the wants of the family. And I'll make that motion.
Have a motion to approve and a second. Other questions, other concerns, other comments? We have a motion and a second to approve item 18-4002 for the Abernathys. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 7B, submitted for preliminary plan approval. 7B1, the item is 14-1009, Estates of Lewis Downs. This is for revision, 17 lots on 37.79 acres zoned RM, located off Rhonda Drive and Rock Springs Midland Road. New South developers are the applicants. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The preliminary plan for this particular subdivision, was originally approved by the commission back at their January 26, 2015 meeting, and originally as a 14 lot subdivision. Revisions were to be considered on the Planning Commission's October 23, 2017 agenda, but were removed due to several outstanding issues. The applicant has worked through those issues and is again wanting to move forward with an additional 3 lots as the preliminary plan that you would see in your agenda packets would demonstrate. 2 of these lots would have access. One of them would have access to Rock Springs Midland Road. 2 of them would still access Rhonda Drive. This plan was originally approved with a waiver allowing the detention pond to be located on a residential building lot in the back. You'll probably remember that. Also, there was a waiver that was approved allowing the use of sprinkler systems. Recent water system improvements in the area have rendered that waiver unnecessary. So staff expects that fire hydrants would be provided to the extent necessary and appear to be based on the revised plan that we've received. They've addressed all the comments we had based on our 2 reviews, and this plan is in good order, and we'd recommend approval.
Thank you.
Michael, you good with everything?
Yes, sir. They've got an existing detention pond that was designed for the initial phase that should handle any additional.
Any questions, other questions or comments?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 14-009 for Lewis Downs. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? The motion to approve carries. Thank you. Doug, you mentioned passing the sprinkler system requirements. Since they're not necessary now, what happens with that approval?
They can just do fire hydrants now. We're not going to make them do that. With this approval that you just did, there was no waiver attached to it.
Okay, so
yeah.
So are we saying that they have to go to the fire hydrant and abandon the sprinkler requirements? Or?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what we're saying. And actually, the hydrants that are out there, all those lots are already within, best as we can tell, are already within 1,000 feet. So this should be in good order.
Very good, thank you. Item 7B2, 15-1006, McCormick Commercial Subdivision. This are also revisions. 3 lots on 31.28 acres, zoned LI, located along West Jefferson Pike. Round Properties is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This commercial subdivision plat was originally approved by the Planning Commission back in 2008. It was originally, most recently approved by the Planning Commission back in May of 2015 as an 8-lot subdivision. And as you recall, Lot 2 has an approved site plan for McCormick Trucking. Septic soil issues have resulted in the reduction of the number of lots from 8 to 3, which is what you see on in your agenda packets. This was a significant change, and based on our subdivision regulations, we didn't feel that we could approve that administratively. So that's why it's coming back before you today. Quite frankly, beyond just the fact that the lot lines are changing, nothing else as far as the engineering with this is changing. It's still in good order, so we'd recommend approval of this.
On the plat notes, number 16, references a previous conditional use permit. Is there a reason that needs to still be on there?
I thought, actually, when I looked at that, I thought about having them remove it. It probably really isn't necessary anymore. I don't think it hurts anything at the same time, because we did approve a Type 3 conditional use permit back on that date for the McCormick Trucking business. But since it's zoned light industrial now, I mean, it's still there, but it wouldn't hurt it one way or the other, I don't think, if it's there or not.
Won't there be any confusion about zoning? Since
Right.
it was zoned properly?
Right.
Other questions or comments?
I'll make a motion to approve subject to staff comment.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve item 15-1006 for McCormick. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? That motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7B3, item 18-1001, McHenry Fields, 17 lots on 127.5 acres, zoned RL, located off Rhodes Lane. Lewis Perry is the applicant. This includes a waiver to the fire hydrant requirements. Doug?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The applicant's proposing to construct an estate lot subdivision with lots that exceed 5 acres throughout the subdivision. All the lots would be accessed via a new county street located off of Rhodes Lane. There were several items with this plan that needed to be addressed after our initial review. After we provided them those comments, they pretty much addressed all the comments that we had. Just a couple of things that we would ask them to do. When they get the water line sizes that they need on this particular plan, when they get that, they just need to note it on the plan, the size of the water line. Also, the other thing has to do with the location of the drive, that the new road that's being built into the subdivision. That's actually on a neighbor's property. Now, I talked with Steve Steele about this, and Steve is present. I saw him walk in a few minutes ago. From the conversations that we had, the applicant and the neighbor, they're in agreement that this is the way that they would like to handle this new road. So again, basically a portion of that road is on the neighboring property. A couple of things on that. Something that Steve Steele and I talked about was the possibility of they might shift the land over to Lewis. That could be done just as a simple re-subdivision plat, because they'd just be shifting that little bit of land over to us. That really wouldn't be something that you would have to see. That could be done administratively. If they decided not to do that, we would just need something in writing from the neighbor, excuse me, stating that he understands that this is what they want to do and he's in agreement with that. Beyond that issue, that's really being the largest one. The plat itself, the preliminary plan's in pretty good order. So everything out beyond that water line issue, just identifying the size. And Mike, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add on that. Okay. But everything else here has been addressed to our satisfaction.
Would staff recommend that property line be moved?
That would be our preference, that they just go ahead and do a re-subdivision plat, moving it over before any work is done or anything like that.
That would be the staff's recommendation?
Yes. At this point, just approving this, the next thing they'd have to do is submit construction drawings anyway. So it's not like they're going to get their approval here and go out and jump on a bulldozer and start moving dirt. So they've got some time to take care of that.
Could a motion to approve address that recommendation?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
So, okay, Steve. Is that right, Steve? Does that meet your?
Sir?
Tell Steve what you said.
Well, basically, like we talked about on the phone the other day, the possibility of them shifting that lot line.
We're fine with what Doug described. That will probably best protect the other property owner. He doesn't want to probably be part of the development, but he's wanting the road on his property to better utilize his property in the future. So by moving it to Lewis, he wouldn't have any liability during construction. So I think that's a good idea, and we can handle that.
I'll make a motion approved.
Second.
Subject to the
Staff comments.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve item 18-1001, McHenry Fields. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Steele. Item 7C, submitted for final plat approval. 7C1, 15-2033, McCormick Commercial Subdivision. These are revisions, 3 lots on 31.28 acres, zoned LI, located along West Jefferson Pike. Ram Properties is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. This is the same property that we discussed just a few moments ago regarding the preliminary plan. I don't have any additional comments. The plat's in good order. So.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve 15-2003 for McCormick. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7C2, 17-2047, Stewart Aaron Carlton subdivision. This is a reapproval, 4 lots on 2.6 acres, zoned RL, located along the southeast intersection of Highway 99 and Mount Vernon Road. Stewart Aaron Carlton is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This plat was originally approved by the commission back in July of 2017. You'll probably recall we went through 2 or 3 meetings with this, different lot configurations, ended up having to lose a lot. The plat was approved, and the applicant's getting ready to record it. Unfortunately, it's been over 6 months, so it's expired. So they're just asking for the reapproval. Everything else with it is fine. It's just a matter of reapproving the plat so we can have them record it.
Motion to approve, subject to staff comment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve 17-2047, Stewart Aaron Carlton. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7C3, 17-2105, Midland Farms Development, 2 lots on 6.97 acres zoned RL located off Midland Road and Squire Jones Road. Cody Agent DBA. Running with Scissors is the applicant.
That's what's on the application.
This includes a request for a potential fire hydrant waiver, Doug.
Yes, sir, thank you. This final plat was actually removed from the Planning Commission's agenda last month due to several outstanding issues, again, one of them being fire hydrant availability. Since that time, they have received confirmation that a fire hydrant can be supported, so in that regard, there's no issue. They are still dedicating right-of-way, which is the reasons before you today. This plat is in good order, beside just really one or two housekeeping items, really just changing some line types for consistency on the plan. Beyond it, you can kind of see where Mike is talking about, kind of see where he's outlining right there, where they show the right-of-way dedication right there. They don't do the same along Squire Jones. So we're just asking them to darken that line like they did on Midland. Beyond that, everything else with this plat's in order. So we'd recommend approval.
Thank you, Doug.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion to approve with staff comments.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve 17-2105 Midland Farms. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7C4, 18-2011, Terry Stacy subdivision, one lot on 1.43 acres on RL located off Rock Springs Midland Road. Terry Lee Stacy is the applicant. This includes dedication of right-of-way and a waiver for off-site soils easement. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. This particular subdivision, as you stated, they're looking to subdivide approximately 1.5 acres from the parent tract, leaving about 13.5 acres. The plat in and of itself is in good order. The reason it's coming before you is because of the right-of-way dedication, and also, if you look at the plat on your agenda, in your agenda packets on your iPads, you'll see that they're relying on a soils easement, which is further back on the property, quite a way back, actually. So beyond that issue and the right-of-way dedication, this is in good order. So the applicants are present if you have any questions for them.
So both lots will rely on the same soil site?
I think there's an existing soil site on the remaining tract, so that it's not really called out, but you can kind of see it, kind of that hatched or dashed area on the property, on the remaining property.
That's not the one that the...
No, they're relying on the one way in the back.
Okay, I guess.
That is a long way. Very expensive.
Okay, you're looking for a waiver,
For the off-site soils, yes.
offsite soil, and the right-of-way. The right-of-ways,
Well, they're dedicating right away, so that's part of it. So you don't have to approve that necessarily, anything special. That's one of the reasons it's being brought, but the off-site soils waiver is what brought this really here more than anything.
And that's off-site for primary and secondary?
Is that primary, is that primary and secondary, or just the primary?
Primary and secondary.
Okay, primary and secondary.
It does look like a lot, enough for primary and secondary, for marginal soil, for a 3-bedroom house.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve
I'll second it.
and a second. Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve 18-2011 for Terry Stacy, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 7C5, 18-2012 Dale Crossno subdivision, 2 lots on 5 acres on RM located along Shores Road. Dale Crossno is the applicant. Doug?
Yes, sir, thank you. The applicant's proposing to split the subject property into 2 separate lots. Lot 1 will contain the existing house. As you can see on your iPads, you can see the layout of the proposed subdivision. Most of the comments we had were housekeeping in nature, and they have been addressed. This plat is actually in good order. One of the questions and comments that we had on this had to do with whether or not a fire hydrant could be supported along Shores Road in this location. The existing, closest existing fire hydrant's just a shade over 1,000 feet outside. It'd be about 1,030 feet or something to that effect. As it turns out, a hydrant can be located along this line. However, the applicant is still asking for a fire hydrant waiver just because the hydrant is just 30 feet outside of 1,000 feet. Now, I told him, and even before just before the meeting, we talked, and I believe our assistant director had some conversation with him last week about this. Just said, it's your right to ask. However, if a hydrant can be located along a line, it has been the practice of the Planning Commission to have that installed. So the applicant is present, and I'll let him make his case, but we'd recommend approval just without the waiver, but I'll let him make his case.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. We're just looking for the waiver.
Would you state your name?
My name's Stephen Hoot. I'm
and
actually
address.
part of the applicant on the subdivision.
Thank
I'll
you.
be purchasing the lot that'll be built on. So we're just looking for the waiver to try to put that money towards our house, and other construction. Now, I've had conversation with Rutherford County Fire Department, Almaville Volunteer Fire Department. I don't feel there's any. I feel confident in their ability where we're at to fight a fire. If the 33 feet, the lady that I talked to on all that, she measured out as well, and she doesn't feel that there was any issue. That they'd be able to fight a fire. That close. That's why we just wanted to ask for the waiver and kind of proceed from that. That's kind of our reasoning. There's already plenty of houses around, and I just didn't want to have to foot the bill myself. Everybody else is going to benefit now. If the waiver doesn't pass, I'll ask them, see if they want to put in on it, and I understand if they wouldn't, want to, because they don't. Most everybody around there is on 5 acre plus tracts, so just thought I'd kind of give our side of it.
Okay.
I don't disagree that, it's safer, but I feel 33 feet. I feel confident that the fire departments would be able to help my house if it ever came to that.
Any questions? Thank you.
Doug, length of streets, we went from 1,200 to 1,600 feet. Have we ever added 30 feet?
To a waiver request, you mean?
I think maybe we have.
I can't think of it. I'm not going to say it has never been done. I will just say historically, if a line can support a hydrant, you instruct them that it needs to be installed. Because in my mind, and I keep coming back to this, is where does it end? If it's only 30 feet now, okay, somebody comes in next month with 50 feet. Well, you let 30 feet go, about 50 feet. Well, what about 1,100 feet? It's only 100 feet. You let 50 feet go. You kind of see how get on that slope.
If it was a subdivision with many houses, I'd feel better about that. But since it's a single home, that's hard.
And Lot 1 is existing house, so his house, and it looks like the building site is at the front of the property,
It's actually
in front of the soil area.
It's actually going to be
It'd be in the back.
in the rear, right?
It'll be behind the soil area.
Right on, yeah, right behind,
Okay.
right there.
That adds a lot of distance.
Is that what makes it go, Dave?
No, it's what, quite frankly, it's, if you measure, if you look at your plat, and it's really close, but the nearest fire hydrant is about, it says on here, measure about 1,033. That's to the closest property line as the truck drives, and that's to the closest property line of Lot 2. So Lot 1's even farther away where the existing house is going to be located by another 126 feet. So, you're not just approving it for Lot 2, you'd be approving it for Lot 1 as well.
Doug, will you, and Chief Farley's here too, in case he would like to interject anything, but would you refresh our memory as how that distance is measured?
It's measured as the truck drives.
But from what points?
The closest point to the property line. It doesn't.
Closest point to the property line.
Correct.
Not,
it doesn't.
Not the house
not
or
where the
dwelling,
house is located, because
not
a lot
the
of
structure. But
right.
the
We wouldn't
property.
necessarily know that on here. Even looking at this plat, if where Lot 2 is, if it's at the front of the lot, it'd probably be a few hundred feet closer than if it were in the back of the lot. There's unfortunately no way for us to know that on the front end, so we just do it to the closest property line.
I'm going to make a motion to approve without the waiver.
We have a motion to approve without the waiver. Do we have a second?
is approved, but he would put in a fire hydrant. Yes, I'll second that.
Everybody understand the motion? Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition?
Yes.
No. Yes, opposition. However you want me to say it.
I think the ayes carried it, but Gail, do you want to call the roll, please?
Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Jim Aberwater.
Yes.
Lee Bogle.
Yes.
David Jones.
Yes.
Mike Cush.
No.
Craig Lynch.
Yes.
Charlotte P.
No.
Pettis Reed.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Aye. The motion to approve carries. Item 7.6, 18-2014, Danny Travis subdivision, 4 lots on 6.26 acres on RM, located off Stewart Creek Road. Danny Travis is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The applicant's proposing to split the subject property into 4 separate lots. There is an existing fire hydrant about 300 feet from the subject property, but the surveyor needs to confirm that all the lots were going to be within 1,000 feet, which they weren't. So they do plan on adding. They did get approval to add another hydrant from Consolidated Utility District. They just need to show it on the location on the plat before it's recorded. Their staff comments said that it was there. Mike and I looked, we just didn't see it. If we're just missing it, that's quite possible. But there is a hydrant, as you can see, right to the west of the property. It just wasn't. It was carrying around a certain point, but it hit 1,000 feet before those last couple of lots. So with that other fire hydrant installed, all lots will be within 1,000 feet of that hydrant. But again, they just need to show the location of that and have it paid for prior to recording, which is what we typically ask for. So with that, other than that issue, this plat's in good order. Mike, did you?
You can see the dash line. This is Pembroke Farms, which we approved a few months ago. They will be installing fire hydrants, which would probably put these northern lots within range, but they haven't started construction yet. But we have approved construction plans for them to start on this.
So it's whoever goes first has to put the hydrant.
But this is a pretty good size development back here. They'll have several fire hydrants for several streets.
So what's your recommendation?
Well, I recommend that, it be approved subject to our comments. Now, like you said, whoever gets there first, if they want to record this plat and move forward with it before the other subdivision's gone forward, then they'll need to install the hydrant. I mean, that's just unfortunately the way it would have to work in this situation. If they're willing to wait and the other one gets going and they do install hydrants first, and it turns out one of those hydrants does meet the 1,000-foot threshold, then they just would need to update the plat to show that.
What triggers the start? Actual wanting to do construction or just recording the plat?
Typically, when they record the plats, are you talking in regards to the larger subdivision or the smaller one?
When we talk about who comes first?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering who decides, what triggers the, I showed up first, that I'm actually ready to start doing construction?
Well, if they
or-
come in, right, if they, I see what you're asking. If they're ready to start construction and we know that it's imminent and there's going to be, and we have a good timeline as to when those are going to be installed, we might look at that. But generally speaking, if he comes in tomorrow and wants to record his plat, I won't sign it until CUD signed off on it, and then they have to show an invoice that they actually did pay for the hydrant. Because even the issue you run into with construction, and this, I would get a little bit of heartburn on this, is the fact that, we've seen subdivisions start up and then for whatever reason stop in the middle. So if we were to let them go without that, say, well, you can install your hydrant now prior to, or you don't have to install your hydrant because this subdivision is getting going.
Risky.
It is. It is.
I'll make a motion to approve subject to staff comments.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve 18-2014 for Danny Travis. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7D, submitted for site plan approval, 7D1, Heather Murchison property. 18-3002, new construction of 34,900 square feet of commercial space and many storage facilities with associated parking zoned EAC located along Miller Road. Joshua Welcome is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This site plan, as you recall, was deferred from the Planning Commission's January 22nd, 2018 meeting. There were some questions about the amount of parking that was shown, as well as concerns about a future water line that would extend through the property from across from I-24. The site plan has been revised to show additional parking, and the project has been phased so not to interfere with the construction of that water line. From planning staff standpoint, there's just a couple of housekeeping items that they do need to bring up. One of the Phase 2 buildings lacks an area label, which is, there you go. And also the T-deck water, you can see that scale on the, for the yeah, right there. For that's the T-deck map. Regardless of the scale they put the site plan at, if they're going to be using septic, the T-deck folks request a 1:100 scale map because that's what their soil maps are at, so they can lay over their maps on that. The word scale in that particular drawing right there does scale out to 1:100, but that larger bar scale that they placed right above the insets does not. So they just need to scale the scale, I guess. As far as that's concerned from planning standpoint, we're okay with what they're proposing now. They've addressed our concerns, but I know Mike's got some drainage concerns. I'll let him take over that.
There's a site plan just to the north of this that's in the works as well, called James Davis. You might remember that, and it will have a detention pond in their, I guess, southwest corner that will empty towards Miller Road, excuse me, Miller Road, and then drain to the south. We've asked them to add a culvert to address this so the water's just not spilling over Miller Road and can continue to travel down the side. So they've added a culvert, but they didn't add any inverts and need to tweak some grading. So it's in pretty decent order. We need to just some housekeeping issues with the detention pond, some fine tuning before we'll let them start construction. But overall, it's in fairly decent order.
So from what you're saying, the concerns that you have would have to be addressed.
Right. Before I'll let them start construction, we'll need to hammer this out, make sure this water can continue to flow to the south, and we've started to attend the building codes, I guess, permit application meeting where they go over the plans as well. So this is another step that we can look at issues before they issue building permits. I've got this approval stamp for grading plans, and they can start moving dirt, but before they can start building buildings, we can make sure everything's hashed out before they get their building permit. But all in all, it's the site is improved from its original conception, and it's in fairly good order, just some fine tuning.
Make a motion to approve, subject to staff's comments.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve 18-3002, Heather Murchison. All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. 7D2, 18-3003, Verizon Wireless Weekly Lane Site. New construction of 145-foot communication towers, including a lightning rod with accessory structures, which is an equipment shelter on 38.9 acres zoned RM located along Weekly Lane. Baker Donaldson on behalf of Verizon Wireless is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The site for this new tower was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals at their January 10th, 2018 meeting. Most of our comments that we had after reviewing the site plan were housekeeping in nature. Those comments have been addressed to our satisfaction, and the site plan is in good order. We'd recommend approval.
Is this just raw land?
There's where they'll be building, there actually is a house and some access. You can see it on the map now that Mike's got pulled up. But he's highlighting the area where it's located.
There's the residence and the garage. This is the area that they're not leased.
And how tall is the tower?
145 feet.
So you can see from the property line, this dimension is 100 feet, so it's,
Yeah.
it should be adequate to be away from any existing structures.
Mr. Chairman, to make a motion to approve with staff comments.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve 18-3003 for Verizon Wireless. Any other questions?
Just more of a curiosity question. How long do these leases typically maturity? Are these like a long-term, 15, 20 years?
Generally 20 to 25 years.
Okay. All right. 20 years.
Other questions? All those in favor of the motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? That motion to approve carries. Thank you. Item 7D3, 18-3004, Full Force, new construction of 8,000 square feet of commercial space on 26.84 acres, Zone CS, located along Manchester Highway. Ryan Casserly is the applicant. Doug.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. The applicant's proposing to construct a new building for storage on the property. There were a number of items that we did address, or that we did identify, I should say, on our initial staff review. Most of those comments were addressed. There were still a few outstanding after we did our second review. Really, the plan itself is in pretty good order. There's a couple of housekeeping items on here, mainly where the septic lines are for the existing house. They show the soil site, but not necessarily where the tank is and how they access that, connect to it, from the tank at least to the house. And that was. Oh, they need to show some for their parking area. They just need to show some landscaping, some shrubs down along that area. Those are things that are fairly easy to take care of. But other than that, okay, just a couple housekeeping items. This plan's in good order. We'd recommend approval of the subject to those comments being addressed.
Thank you, Doug.
Motion approved, subject to staff comments.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to approve 18-3004 for Full Force. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of that motion to approve, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion to approve carries. Thank you. Staff reports and other business. Doug.
Just I laid out on your tables before you our proposed budget for the fiscal year 2018 and 2019. Really, this is a what I'd call a fairly no-frills budget. None of our budgets really are all that exciting, to be honest with you. But there are a couple things here that do bear mentioning. One of those is you'll see under line item 308, which is consultants. You'll see we have budgeted $50,000 for a startup to the long-range transportation plan. If this stays in the budget, what we'd anticipate is doing a request for proposals, sending out to various engineering consultant firms for the project to update our long-range transportation plan. We anticipate getting a steering committee together to review those proposals and whatnot. So more on that to come. But just to let you know that that's in there. You'll also see under data processing equipment toward the bottom of the page, we still have quite a bit of money located in that. That has to do with the electronic plan review software proposal that is out right now. The bids are due this coming Wednesday. So we're excited to see what kind of responses we get on that. Some of this money may actually come out of the budget because we did budget, as you recall, for a lot of these expenses in this fiscal year that we're in right now. So a lot of it will just depend on the timing as far as what we can get done. We may have to, carry over some money, which is why we just budgeted the entire amount in there. You'll also notice that we do have money on there for 2 new inspector vehicles. We had money in the budget last year, and we had secured a grant through the Congestion Management Air Quality, Construction Mitigation and Air Quality, CMAQ grant funds. We received the grant and then come to find out from Federal Highway that what we were asking for wasn't allowed in the grant anyway. The state did appeal that decision, but instead of being able to secure grant money for 80% of the costs of the vehicles, The only thing we could do was 80% of the cost difference between a hybrid type vehicle, electric vehicle, and what a standard vehicle would cost. So because of that, we didn't purchase anything out of that line item. So we just took that and we're not going to fool with the grant this time around, since now we know that where federal highway stands on this. So we just budgeted for 2 other inspector vehicles and the safety floor mats and whatnot. So those are the main items in there. This is really more for your information. If you want to make a motion that you are accepting of the budget, that's fine. It's not a requirement, but we just kind of like you to know what we're thinking for the next upcoming fiscal year.
Doug, the new vehicles, would they replace vehicles?
Yes.
And would those old vehicles be retained or disposed of?
Yes, we would keep the better of the vehicles for our summer interns. We have summer interns that walk streams and need to place a vehicle on the end of a stream and the beginning of a stream, and then they walk to the end and then drive back to their vehicle. So we would keep the better of the 2 vehicles and then probably surplus the additional one. We're putting in 12 to 14,000 thousand miles a year. So and the last new vehicles that we had were in 2007. So we're in dire need of new vehicles.
Understood. Everyone knows the increase in business that this department is dealing with. Are you guys okay with current staff?
Well, now that you mention it, we would honestly, and we've talked about our future needs, we would like to add more positions. Right now, we just have nowhere to put them, for one. I think we'll be okay for maybe another year. And if things continue like they're continuing right now, we're going to have to ask for people next year. I mean, we almost can't. We're to the point. I'm down still a planner from when we lost one during the recession, and we do a good job with what we have. At least I hope we do. I think we do. But it would be nice to have a 4th planner back on staff. But as of right now, again, we just don't know. We'd have to really do some shuffling around as to where to put all the people.
Well, and also with these big ticket items, we were reluctant to ask for more staff and these big ticket items. So we're just going to go with the skeleton crew and carry on.
I tend to challenge that. And I'm not saying we need another person like this summer, but I would recommend that you look for maybe adding one half of the year, the first of the year, something like that. It'd give you time to, it wouldn't be for a full budget year that way if we did that. And it also give the staff time to kind of learn where their future lies, maybe, and also to do that shuffling if need be. But I can just imagine how you guys are pushed to meet the demands that we have faced over the last year and the demands that it appears that we're going to be facing in the foreseeable future. And I don't know how the rest of the committee feels about that, but I would hate for us to miss things and not do a good job in planning if we are understaffed. And I would make the recommendation to this body that we instruct the staff to look at adding an additional person the first of the year instead of this summer when the budget year comes about. And I'll make that recommendation and ask for input from this committee.
Is there some money here that you could shuffle around and maybe start there, or maybe start earlier than Jeff was talking about, this 77,000 there, or what?
Well, Doug said he would take a salary cut.
I did?
Doug.
As our budget currently is right now, like I said, depending on where we go and how much we can get done on the electronic plan review software package that we're looking to purchase, some of that money may be available. I mean, all we can do at this point is talk to Mayor Burgess and kind of see what he instructs us to do, and we can kind of relay him to him this conversation that we've had, and we'll just kind of see where it goes with that. But we appreciate your input into it, of course.
Well, if it's okay with the committee, we'll leave it up to Doug to have some communication with Mayor Burgess and relay this commission's concern about staffing needs, okay?
That's what we'll do.
And we would encourage you to be somewhat assertive when it comes to that point with Mayor Burgess. And Mayor Burgess has just been a wonder to work with over the last 8 years as it relates to needs of the county. And we would encourage that you have that conversation with him. And if there's a way to squeeze some money into the budget to add an additional person, and once again, even if it's at mid-year, and even if it's a trainee, someone that has the credentials and doesn't have a lot of experience, we could probably give them that experience. So you guys move forward with that and report back to us whenever.
Yes, sir.
As the results of that, okay?
On the long-range transportation study for consultants, explain to me what's going to happen there. Do they tell us what we want, or we tell them what we want? I know Elam Road that Mike talked about we had last Monday night.
Right.
How does that work?
Well, and I'll let Mike chime in at any time he feels that he would want to. Generally with the plan, I mean, the consultant, we're the client, they're working for us, so we would tell them what we want to see in this plan. Now, that doesn't mean that they wouldn't have input in the process and say, hey, you might want to look at these particular options. Ultimately, I think it's our decision what we want to see in the plan and how we want that plan to move forward. Like you said, to include something like those different intersections and things. Now, just kind of onto the side of that larger discussion, we have reached out to City of Murfreesboro officials and are meeting with them tomorrow regarding that intersection. So I know that was something you all had asked us to kind of keep you in the loop about. So we'll, after the meeting, next time we see you, we'll report kind of what we found out. But generally what happens with a long-range plan, again, we put out a request for proposals, what we're looking for. During that time, we can establish some sort of a steering committee or something like that. If you all would like to be involved in actually choosing the consultant, we can do that. We did that with the comprehensive plan. We had like kind of a subsect of the steering committee kind of help choose the consultant firm that we use, the team that we ended up using for that. And then the steering committee is kind of the team that kind of drives the process along. There's several meetings in the process and whatnot. So generally, that's how that would play out.
Once we select a consultant, they will have to work with, the town of Smyrna, the city of Murfreesboro, to coordinate their long-range transportation plans with our goals. Also with the highway department to see what they have on their agenda. So it's going to be a little bit of a juggling act.
June, July.
Well, yeah, I mean, we'd wait to make sure the funding was in place. I mean, we can start working on a request or proposal before then, but obviously we don't want to put a request out there and come to find out it's been cut out of the budget. So I would anticipate, we could be working on it, but then when July 1 hits and we know the money's there, then we can hit the ground running at that point.
Yeah. Here's what we want, the money's here.
Right. And I anticipate, and this is how I explained it to Mayor Burgess as well, of course, we've reached out to some other communities to kind of find out their process and their costs and things. We would think this would be a multi-year process. This is not the full amount that you're seeing here, but this would be more than enough to get us started and probably get us through at least the first year. We're probably looking at a couple-year process, 2-3 year process, I would think. And cost just depends on, we'll just have to see what we get. The one quote I got, the email I got from one of the towns I talked with, they said about $80,000 is what they looked at for the total is what their budget was. So, this, I think, if you budget 2 years at $50,000, I mean, that takes care of that. And again, if it's not that much, we just lower it by that much. We just don't use the money, it goes back into fund balance anyway.
But you mentioned the highway department.
Yes.
I see our superintendent here. Greg, you have any comments? You're going to be a major player in this process.
I definitely think it would help us in our daily operations to know what other people's plans are.
Thank you. Any other questions on the budget? I think we probably need to send a message, and if you guys are so willing, I'll entertain a motion to approve and forward.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to support the budget as presented with Chairman's comments.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other questions on that motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you. Anything else, Doug?
I don't have any.
I think we have an agenda item that we need to add, and we'll need a suspension of the rules to add that agenda item, and I received word of that yesterday from Mike Cush. So I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved.
We have a motion to suspend and a second. All those in favor of that motion to suspend the rules to add an agenda item, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Believe it or not, it has been 10 years since we have adjusted our current noise ordinance. It just seems like 3 or 4 years ago when we all sat here, or most of us sat here and worked on that. Tanya has been diligently working with some new text and new language for the noise ordinance. And this has come up for a couple of reasons, but you know, in the last 10 years, stop and think from a planning standpoint what we have looked at in terms of plans and PUDs. Our density on properties is becoming more intense. We're pushing the envelope in terms of separation between homes. So we're living in a much more dense community these days. So the noise issue is even becoming more of an issue. As a commissioner, the main complaints that I get from constituents, besides unkept property and tall grass and things like that, are noise. And our current ordinance on noise is less than stellar. It is basically impossible to enforce, and I'll let Tanya expound on that. But very quickly, and I'll let her talk about some timetable. We've got some new drafts put together on a noise ordinance that we would like to bring to planning. She has already talked to Doug and talked to the county attorney a little bit. We've got to figure out a better way to enforce. But part of the noise ordinance also deals with things that are hugely annoying in subdivisions, which I also get calls about, and that is fireworks and gunfire. And for those of us who have been on this commission for some time, Chief Farley every couple of years talks about his issues with fireworks in the county and his concerns with the fire safety and injuries that happen from fireworks. So we're also in this draft putting some teeth into the fireworks ordinance that we will all have a chance to look at and discuss. So that being said, I've asked Chief Farley here, Tanya here to discuss, but also I've got a constituent that has been kind enough to come and chat, but he's been helping push me and this issue because he lives just outside the city limits in a major subdivision, and he, like many others that I get phone calls from, are suffering from the problems we have with our current noise ordinance, which more importantly, really I'm talking about the fireworks and gun discharge, firearm discharge. So if it please the commission, and thank you for suspending the rules, Phil, if you don't mind, if you would come and state your name and address and just give us a few minutes on what you're having to deal with, you and your neighbors and others that are living.
And my pets.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And your pets, exactly.
I'm a little raspy. I can always tell when the pollen's kicking in, so please forgive my voice. And thank you all for letting me say just a few words about it. It's a really bad problem. My name's Philip Boykin, and I, as a bird would fly, I'm probably a half a mile from Veterans. I'm right down the road there from Windrow, from the new substation. It's called Salem Downs. It's a pretty nice area out there. It's across the road from New Salem, which is heavily, densely populated. Most of the problems, in my opinion, come from New Salem. However, there is one house near me that, let's just say they like to shoot guns on a regular basis. And from borderline, from my property line to theirs is probably 50 yards. Anyway, I've lived and worked, me and my wife and family, for over 30 years in Rutherford County. And we both, matter of fact, my wife used to work with Larry over there a little bit years ago, and we're familiar with Larry. Appreciate you coming, Larry. Anyway, excuse me. When we retired, we hoped for a, you know, just a general, safe, peaceful atmosphere to be in retirement. I'm 67. My wife's soon to be 65. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case the last few years. And one reason is, when I grew up, fireworks were nothing compared to what they are today. I think most of us would agree, the low charges that they had back then. Well, where are they getting these fireworks? Basically, in my neighborhood, they start about a week before school gets out, sometimes two, and they go all summer long. I mean, all summer long, till usually the end of September. It's like mom and dad say, here, I'm going to work, I'll buy your fireworks, and you shoot them. And this is a fact. Sometimes these kids get out and shoot after 1 a.m. in the morning. And we've had double insulated windows put in to try to deaden the noise, and it helps some. And we spent thousands of dollars installing these windows. And sometimes they shoot off these, they call them cannons. They vibrate the house. It's like a subwoofer. We've lost one little Yorkie due to this fact. Ran away. And I talked to Paws, and Paws will tell you that fireworks, especially loud fireworks and gunfire, are the two major reasons that they have stray dogs show up and lost people losing their dogs. I've talked to the National Humane Society. They said they'd be glad to bring some people into Rutherford County to make this, because they're kind of upset about it too. I mean, I talked to the national head of the Humane Society. I talked to the state attorney general. He said it is definitely in the local arena, a county, through planning and codes and commission, to enforce this. So you have the authority. I've got it from the top. I've talked to Lamar Alexander. I was down at Congressman DeHarlay's office on another issue that's been elevated to Inspector General in Washington, D.C. I just think that we're in a very unsafe situation, and I'll give you an example. I go to a Bible class, Bible study, in College Grove Tuesday night and Thursday night. And one Tuesday night I got back, and we have one night's 2 hours, one night's 3 hours. And when I pulled into my driveway a little after 8:30 and got out of my car, I heard a pop, 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 and a bullet. I heard it whiz by my head. It was totally dark. I didn't know where it came from. You talk about a scary feeling. And that's not the first time it's happened. It's happened before from some neighbors that I won't name right now. I know it came from that area. And the sheriff's department's been called on, that. But anyway, that's another story. But I've heard them go through the trees. We have tree lines on both sides of us. And there's larger lots over there. anywhere from ours is on the smaller side. My neighbor, Mr. Jay McCraw, who's a director at Nissan, has had some problems, and I've had a United Airline pilot on the other side of me, retired, that's had those problems, and he recently passed away. It stressed that poor man out so bad he couldn't take it. It's a problem, and if you've never had a bullet come by your head, I hope you never do, because it's a scary feeling at night. You don't know where it's coming from, and I've had to put up with that, and put up with losing a little Yorkie that we love dearly. Any of y'all own pets? I mean, you know, that's part of your family. And these kids are so entitled these days. And if you don't believe me, all right, I checked with Walmart. Now, Walmart doesn't sell them all year long, but I've seen them already prepackaged. But they'll sell them a lot longer than you allow your vendors to sell them. That's a fact. And if you want to look at your phones and Google Amazon, oh boy, you got a big choice. And I'm talking about extremely strong fireworks, even manuals on how to make cherry bombs and M80s. They offer that on Amazon. And some of these kids are doing that. These are fire hazard. Larry well knows that. We've had some dry situations, and we've even had the roof of our car damaged by something as small as bottle rockets from a neighbor. We don't know which neighbor for sure, but we know it was one or two letting their grandkids shoot bottle rockets, and they burned right in through our paint, damaging our property. But we didn't know which one. They were shooting them on both sides of us. And it was after the 4th. My recommendation would, I was a kid, I shot fireworks, but back then, you got them a day or two before the 4th, and you shot them. If you had any left over, you shot them a day or two after. And then my mom and dad said, stop, you're disturbing the neighbors. And I stopped. And I think that's reasonable. On the 4th of or the New Year's holiday, a lot of people do it. But you know what? In my neighborhood, it never stops till after 2 a.m. That's ridiculous. It should easily stop at 12:30. I mean, I think that's being very reasonable. Do y'all? I mean, I'm okay with, you know, kids enjoying their childhood, and I'm a pro. A member of the IRA or NRA, and I have some shotguns, and I've hunted, and you know, I think shotguns, if you've got a large enough acreage, you know, we've got over 2 acres, a little 410 shotgun or something like that. TWRA says it's open season on skunks, which we've got all year long, and they say if you see one and you don't want to get sprayed or something, you have our permission. You know, I don't have any problem with that. But I have a family member in government, and I've talked to my another family member, Lieutenant Colonel and state troopers, that's told me how far a bullet rifle, especially a high-powered, like a 7.6 by 3.9, can go over a mile. And when you've got houses from you, and even in bigger acreages, but you've got a bunch of houses on the other side of the road, and that's the main area the problem is coming from, although we do have a few problems in our neighborhood. I just wish that you would pass something that we could enjoy. I mean, in the city, if I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, gunfire's banned. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was. And fireworks are banned because y'all have one of the best shows next to Nashville probably in the state. Is that right? You're not allowed to shoot fireworks in the city?
Yes, you are. Just during the just during the holiday
okay.
period.
Yeah. But you're not allowed to shoot them 1 or 2 a.m., are you?
No.
Okay. Well, you are in the county, evidently. I'm just asking, I mean, it is a fire hazard. Am I right, Larry?
In dry conditions, it would be very bad.
And I think last time we spoke, you said if it's going to work, it's got to have some teeth in it. And that means a fine and a court appearance. And then mom and dad won't be so quick to say, yeah, let's order you $200 or $300 worth of these cannons so you can shake everybody's windows in the neighborhood. They don't seem to care. Kids are open. Just do whatever you want to. Not all of them, not everybody, I don't mean that, but several these days. And I'm begging and pleading with you. We've lost one of our pets. We've had damage done to our property. I've had a bullet come right by my head. We're talking about endangerment of life. And I've worked and paid taxes and voted in this county for over 30 years. And we'd like to keep living here and just have a peaceful retirement. I wouldn't want anybody's child, this is not just me, there could be children out playing, riding their bike, get struck by a bullet. Sometimes they ride down the street after dark. I'd hate to see that. I don't know how that would reflect on Rutherford County if somebody got shot just because something wasn't in place like that. It'd really be bad. I'm asking you, please do something about these problems of these huge cannon fireworks. And if they want to shoot them for a week, okay. If they want to shoot them for a few days around the New Year's, okay. Everything, Easter, you name it. It can be a leaf falls off a tree. Well, that's a holiday. We're going to shoot fire. It's all summer long. I'm telling you, out where I live. Please address this problem. I'm begging you. For safety and for fire prevention and loss of pets that we love. Please do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Phil. So, Larry, do you have any comments you'd like to make? Or talk about what the city's current ordinance is?
City or county?
What did I say?
Well, I don't,
The city.
really don't know what the county ordinances are at this time, but I reached out to the city. Of course, they got a whole 12-page thing on fire prevention, but just the thing on fireworks, it says items of fireworks may only be sold, offered for sale, or shipped in the city by persons permitted by the state as fireworks seasonal retailers between June 28th and July 5th, and between December 26th and January the 2nd. Seasonal use of fireworks. Fireworks may only be used within the city on July the 3rd, July the 4th, and July the 5th, December 31st, and January 1st, except when used in public display, which has received a permit from the State Fire Marshal's Office. Now, what that is if public display is if a lot of your wedding venues, people getting married, stuff will have a big fireworks display, but that's done by a pyrotechnics company. They have to get a permit from the State Fire Marshal's Office, which they come in and they have to give me a map showing the fallout, and I have to sign off on that. So I know what the date is, the time, and they have to give a diagram of, where the fallout shows what it could possibly touch. The hours on the fireworks may be used between the hours of 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. from July 3rd through July 5th, and between 10 a.m. and 12 a.m. midnight on December 31st and December 31st, and between 12 a.m. midnight and 1 a.m. and between 10 a.m. and 11 p.m. on January 1st. And then, of course, it talks about on the second page, and I've got copies of this if anybody wants them. Pass that around. It talks about the definition of a bottle rocket. It talks about the DOT Class C common fireworks, which is what your retailers sell. It talks about a mortar, a tube loaded with shells that propel from the tube into the air that produces a break with varying colors, effects, and noises, also called tube, mine, or gun. Then you have the reloadable, is what your professionals use, a tube that can be used multiple times to fire separate shells. The device is designed to fire one shell at a time. After a shell is fired, a new shell can be loaded, hence the name reloadable. So, then it talks about it shall be unlawful for any person to sell any items of fireworks without providing the purchaser with a written list of the days and hours of the lawful use of fireworks within the city of Murfreesboro, and written safety instructions appropriate for the type of fireworks sold. And what I just read you a while ago is prohibited. They're prohibited to sell it or use these type fireworks in the city.
bottle rockets, mortars, reloadable, and shells. And then it also has to be 16 years old to purchase them or have an adult with them, just for Class C fireworks. But a lot of the issues that we cover with a fire hazard during dry conditions, low humidity, we have, because we adopted the fire code and the commission passed it, we have the authority to have a burn ban in Rutherford County, and I have already done that this year. When the humidity got real low and everything got real dry, we stopped it for a couple of days. Forestry don't really like that much, but they set up in Nashville and issue the permits, but yet we have to run the calls down, so we do issue that and put that out to media when we feel like conditions are too dry. This can be a hazard, especially in the wintertime, if we don't have wet conditions and things are very dry with dead sagebrush and stuff like that. It can get away from it pretty quick, but this is kind of what the city has, and I didn't feel any need for us to try to reinvent the wheel. If you do decide to pass something, I figure I would think if we reflect what the city does, that way everybody's kind of aware of the same rules and regulations.
Mr. Farley?
Yes, sir.
On enforcement for your burn ban, do you issue citations?
Yes, sir.
All right, and the way I understand the city ordinance for fireworks, Murfreesboro City Police enforce that, right?
Or codes.
Oh, yeah, our code, anybody, I would say the PD enforced it, but we have 6 or 7 fire inspectors and investigators, and that we could cite people to court. County codes can do the same, and of course, however y'all want to handle it with what you would require the sheriff's office to do. But with the call volume they got, I don't know if they would even do much about it.
Yeah, I'd like to.
I'm not going to speak for the sheriff, and I guess
I'd like to ask the county attorney to comment on enforcement by the sheriff's department.
Before you leave, Chief, just to be clear, I think what Chief said was if we adopted something very similar to what the city does now in terms of the dates of use, which in this paper that he passed around was July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and December 31st and January 1st, with some time slots in there, you would support that? Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'll support and enforce whatever y'all decide to pass.
On the mortars and the reloadables, that drop it in that tube, it goes up. It's great. Makes a loud noise and makes a floral display of some kind. Is that outlawed in the city? Is that what this says?
According to it says prohibited sales and use under Section 12-30. It's saying that they're. Well, I mean, to me, that a reloadable shell is something that a professional should be operating.
Right.
Those are probably one of the leading on all the tents that's out in the county. That's probably their leading sale.
Well, I mean, but I don't think you can reload them. Now, I may be incorrect.
I'm taking reload where you got the tube and you got a box full of these balls and you just put them down in there and light them.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking reloadable.
Yeah.
Well, that according to this, it's prohibited. And I know bottle rockets are outlawed because those things take off and they're cheap and you shoot a million of things, but they'll take off. And of course, when they land on something in a car, they can burn the paint,
or wood shingles,
dry condition, or start fire in a field. As a matter of fact, if y'all remember back, I can't remember what year it was, 2010 or 11. We had a real dry spell, and people were crucifying me on Facebook because and all social media because I wouldn't create a ban burn. At that time, I didn't have the authority. And of course, we've taken care of that. But conditions get very dry. People get very scared, and you start open burning or shooting fireworks. Of course, most of y'all who live out in the country, a sagebrush field, just a little spark and it gets dry, can get 30 acres pretty quick. You can ask Mr. Beatty at Beatty Farms about that. It can get away and burn his barn down, but it wasn't because of fireworks. It was just because it was dry conditions, and just a little spark can create a lot of damage very quickly.
Larry, before you leave, you say bottle rockets in the city of Murfreesboro are taboo, they're outlawed?
Well, according to the way I read this document, and I give everybody a copy, on the second page it says prohibited sales and use of possession of fireworks, and it says definitions: A, bottle rocket.
How can that be enforced out in the county? I live in the city, and I've got bottle rockets in my swimming pool every 4th of July. City can't enforce it. How in the world could we possibly enforce it out in the county?
I was going to ask the same question, because on the 4th of July, I come to the city to watch every one of these in subdivisions. I see some of the greatest displays in subdivisions of every one of these. I mean, I can go right over here on St. Andrews, which is in your district.
Yeah.
And when I leave there, I can't get down some streets for these mortars and these shells casings sitting out in the middle of the street. And I'm sitting there, and I've sat there for a couple hours watching them in the middle of subdivisions, and I have yet to see the city come in there and do anything.
Well, I guess
And
they got.
I wondered, how do you enforce this?
They
and
got
how
this
you
in
do it?
place, but evidently they're not enforcing it.
That's what I'm saying. You know, it has to be enforced to get this done. And
Well,
you know, I totally understand this, because I get the same calls Mike does in the county, and it goes on and it goes on and it goes on, or it starts, as Mr. Bonking says, that weeks in advance. I mean, it's. I don't believe in some war zones you have this, and we also have the problem not only with pets or whatever. We have veterans that have come back,
right.
and they have to deal with this, that have problems with all this. We've got this same problem.
That is a fact, because I've got a guy that I hired as a veteran, and he don't deal well with fireworks going off.
And all of this, but I get these calls continue, not only with fireworks. We now have out in the county, we got a lot of people that are buying, what's it, Tannerite?
Oh yeah.
That you can buy, and you talk about shooting into that. You talk about an explosion, it'll shake an entire house.
You can hear it for probably 2 miles when they blow that up.
So, but now, enforcement is what I'm trying to figure. I mean, you gotta know where it's coming from and where it's at. That's
Well,
the big thing.
Commissioner Cook.
But I like the idea of the fact that of when you sell it and how long you
Yeah,
can sell it.
that's step one. Step one is
That's
to.
what that's a good way to start, but you know, that will be a problem enforcing it, because like I said, I have yet, like the commissioner here says, seeing it enforced. I haven't seen the city enforce it. That's what I'm.
Yeah. Well, he asked me to bring my thoughts on it, and I thought
I get the same calls.
there's no
I
use in
totally
reinventing the
understand.
wheel. Just if you do something, you know, could mirror what the city does.
Larry,
some
why doesn't
areas.
any knock on the city's enforcement part?
Pardon?
I just don't know how they
Oh,
do
yeah.
it, how they could possibly do it.
Totally understand.
You
Totally
got bottle rockets going up all over the city. How could you possibly enforce something like that?
Well,
so
just-
you've got a law in the book that you can't enforce.
And I guess a lot of that, it goes back to just like last year, we had close to, in the county-wide, across the county, over 7,000 fire calls, responses, where in 2010, we only had 1,300 county-wide. So we've gone from 1,300 to 7,000 emergency calls just to the fire department. So you take the sheriff's office, they respond to everything. So you can multiply that by 10,000. And so when you get that kind of call volume and that kind of, you know, things going on, you answer calls, and I know he feels different, but in the day-to-day operations of things, there's times when you have to prioritize calls, and this right here may not be as important a call as a MVA, somebody trapped, somebody's home being broken in. So I mean, you just kind of maybe get lost in the show. I don't really know. I'm just theorizing at that point.
We're not trying to shoot the messenger.
Oh, I know. Yeah, he just asked me to speak on it, and like I say, Mr. Borkin talked to me, and I said, a lot of this is based on what the commission, planning commission wants to put in place, and I said I'll try my best to enforce whatever they hand down, if it's my job to enforce that. But we do enforce fire codes. We can write citations, but however y'all decide to handle it, is how I'll work with that.
I think we have to give them the tools and the authority to enforce it. Now, if, my neighbor's setting off fireworks when they're not supposed to, and another neighbor's getting broken into, forget the fireworks and, you know, go where they're most needed. But when they are available, we need to give them the tools and the authority to handle it.
You want to chat about reinforcement, Tanya, or?
Between myself and Josh, I think
between two of you.
enforceability is ultimately the biggest.
What about banning the gunfire? Yeah, we'll chat about that in a second. And gunfire may be something you might have some knowledge on.
And Josh, before you start, I'll address the committee a little bit. Josh and I have worked on this for years, since I was employed with Rutherford County. Most of your calls come in at night, and codes and zoning officers do not have the ability to carry a gun, to go up to a house and knock on the door at 10 o'clock at night, or to address something in the dark out in the county. It is very hard to get the sheriff's backup there when you address a complaint. And I understand that because they're covered up with everything also. But I just want to let the committee know that the enforcement from zoning officers it's very hard. The officer can go out, he can try to hear what he hears or sees, but as far as issuing a citation to someone that is target practicing and things like that, you just don't want to be there with an untrained officer. And like I say, Josh and I started the noise ordinance, I guess, and for the first time when it came up, and there's so many people that, well, I live out in the county, why can't I do what I want to do? That's why I moved to the county where I could target practice or whatever, you know. And all. The subdivisions that we have are very condensed now and very close natured on the houses, and I understand having some rules and regulations about in major subdivisions, but on private property it's kind of hard. But I'll let Josh and my question, Josh, was how do we get the sheriff's department more involved on late night calls?
Right. So I'm happy to offer a few comments. I'm not going to have the answers at this point. I think Commissioner Cush is to be commended on attempting to tackle some of these issues. And Mr. Jones is right. For years and years, the old noise ordinance has been around for a long, long time. And enforcement has always been the challenge with it. Because by the time you get complaints about a noise, by the time somebody gets there, the noise is over. And so you can't, it's hard to catch them in the act, so to speak, on many of these kinds of events. The fireworks may be different. But here's just a few thoughts. I think in terms of trying to tackle this, as I was listening to the discussion, I'm hearing, we started out talking about a noise ordinance and then we parked on fireworks. And I don't know if those need to be addressed together or separately, and that might be something that needs to be considered, is whether or not there should be some kind of fireworks ordinance that's one animal, and there's a noise ordinance that's an entirely different
I think they're two
animal.
They're two separate things, but in the noise ordinance, you address reference fireworks, and then you see fireworks ordinance. Right.
Understand. Right. Okay. So there may be some thought there about the way that would go forward. Just in the big picture, in terms of enforcement, I mean, ultimately, I don't know how some of these things do get enforced on a regular basis, but I do think there's a difference between a city and a county, and cities often under their municipal charters or otherwise will have authority to create misdemeanors and so forth, and they have a city court for purposes of enforcing those things. Counties, generally speaking, cannot create crimes. So we can't create an ordinance as a general rule that would invent a new criminal act, and that can make enforcement by a sheriff's department challenging. And so that's why most of these, as far as I know, And I'm happy to investigate any of this. So, you know, I didn't know this was even this was an add-on today. So it's not as if I have a big script here. But I think generally speaking, the county can't create new crimes, which makes jurisdiction with the sheriff's office challenging because for that reason. So usually the codes department has been enforcing these things more as a civil matter. And of course, the codes department can cite people for codes violations, but, you know, that's a difficult enforcement process, to say the least. And it's not usually very quick, and it's got its set of issues that the codes enforcement officers can address more directly. So anyway, I say all that to say, to me, if you're trying to get the sheriff's office involved, probably the most obvious way to do it from the cuff here would be to allow reports from the sheriff's office to support a codes violation. So there's already been, I think, in the old noise ordinance language about people complaining and kind of what information does a codes department need before they could say someone has violated a noise ordinance. Well, maybe one piece of information could be reports with the sheriff's department, so that the sheriff's department's not really enforcing it per se, but they become a conduit for information. That report could go to the codes department. The codes department could rely on that report as part of their basis to pursue noise violations. So that's one thought. I'm not saying there's not any way to vest the sheriff's office with independent authority. Maybe there is. That's just something I think we'd have to investigate more carefully before we jump on that. And then in terms of fireworks generally, I don't think there's any problem really with regulating reasonable time, place type regulations on fireworks. I think it's just a matter of where you put that. Is that a freestanding ordinance? Is that a zoning component of the zoning ordinance? You know, where does that live, and how do we get it passed properly so that everybody knows what the rules are? So I don't know, maybe that helps address your question.
What about firearm discharge in major subdivisions or?
But Mike, before
Yeah.
we get into
Okay.
firearms,
Mhm.
we've spent a lot of time talking about fireworks, and I'd like to kind of address those things separately, because I think there are two different issues.
Okay, sure.
And if we can get Josh to comment on, could we, as a county, as a planning department, pass an ordinance that related to fireworks, the sale of and the discharge of, similar to what the city did? Could we do that?
I think that you can. I would like to reserve the right to be wrong about that until I look into it. But I remember fireworks coming up when we were talking. I remember the fire ban several years ago, and the whole issue of the fire ban and us doing the ordinance that authorized the fire ban. And around that time, we've had conversation, I know, Doug, you'll remember some of that, about fireworks. And I think there are some statutes around fireworks regulations. Does that sound right to you?
I believe it is. In our ordinance right now, we have a section under temporary use permits that deal with the temporary firework tents. You recall we just brought some amendments to you just within the last month or two regarding the ability to administratively renew locations of firework tents that have been there for years on end. It does spell out in these regulations that we have now. I'll say that our regulations aren't as in depth as, say, the city's regulations are, because I'm fairly familiar with those. But we do allow basically a 2-week time period between or prior to July 4th and January 1st. And then the tents have to be removed 7 days after July 4th or January 1st. It doesn't really get into the firing of the fireworks, the discharge of the fireworks, or what can be sold as far as what types of fireworks, but it does give you at least a time frame as to when they can be sold in the temporary firework tents.
So you think it's possible that we could tighten those up?
I think you could tighten those up, yes. Now, I will say, we're already getting into the season now where a lot of them are starting to come through. My recommendation, if we did look at something and some changes to this, just for some of them who came in late to the game aren't getting 2 weeks, and the other ones are, for fairness, that if we do make some changes, of course, we would have to bring them through this process, 2-month process anyway. I would just make any changes probably effective, say, January 1st of 2018 or something like that. That way everybody's playing on the same ball field at that point.
You're talking about in sale.
Correct. Now, as far as, and when they can be out there, right, the time frames and things. Now, as far as what can be sold and those kind of things, that's not typically something that you would handle in the zoning ordinance as far as like a lot of the different types of fireworks, the reloadables and different things like that. That's generally, and I think that's how the city does it, is a separate city code. I don't think that's in their zoning ordinance. I could be wrong. And I, like Josh, I'd reserve the right to be wrong on that. I like that, actually. But that is something that I would like to look into a little bit more. But yes, I think we could kind of beef up the regulations we have for temporary firework tents in our zoning ordinance.
But it doesn't deal with when they shoot them.
Correct.
So we still have that separate issue too. You've got when they can be sold, and then you have the question of when they can be fired.
Yeah.
Which you could also, attempt to limit. And I feel reasonably comfortable saying that you can do an ordinance that would limit when they can be shot. What I'm much less comfortable with is what you do if someone violates it. That's what I think will be the more difficult aspect of it. Because again, if some kids are out shooting fireworks and the neighbor calls and says they were shooting fireworks and they're not supposed to be, by the time anybody gets there, it may be over. And I just don't know then, what happens at that point. Are we saying that the codes department's going to cite their parents for a codes violation? Or are we saying that there's been a violation of the noise ordinance, and what's the evidence? The neighbor's complaint that somebody was shooting fireworks, how sure are we it was this kid and not this kid? And does that kid even live there? I don't know. That starts to get pretty complicated to me in terms of how you enforce all of that and get them to a spot where you're holding somebody accountable. That may not be a reason not to do it, though. It may just be a secondary problem that you address as it unfolds.
Yeah, and I really, it'd be good to have something on the books and have some regulations. It's just a matter of enforcement.
And if I can add something to the enforcement piece, and this is something that Tanya, Mike, myself, Larry, and some others like Mac Nolan, EMA, EMS, we've all been meeting with our Deputy Mayor, Jeff Davidson, about the creation of an environmental court, where a lot of these type issue, basically you get one of the general sessions judges would do a separate court time docket, and also PAWS has been involved in this as well, don't want to leave them out, but they'd create a separate docket for just these type of issues, because what we end up dealing with, and I know Tanya and David, I know you all dealt with this, and a lot of the times when you go to general sessions and they have hundreds of cases to go through, quite frankly, somebody who's not cutting the grass doesn't really rise to the level of importance in their dockets. So we end up having, like you said, an enforcement issue at that point. This is something that's kind of in its genesis right now, but it's something that we are moving toward. So there are discussions ongoing about that. So I did want everybody to be aware of that we have been involved in those discussions.
Josh, before you step down.
Yeah.
What, from a legal standpoint, so if my next door neighbor is shooting off fireworks outside, let's say we establish a zone of time, and they're doing that outside that zone of time, and so I take out my iPhone and video that those are those two kids, and that's the address, and I've got it on video, and so I call codes or I call the sheriff's department, and somebody comes out and I don't see any kids. I see a pile of spent Roman candle tubes, but I say, well, here's my video. Is that submissible?
Yeah, I think it could be. I mean, I view so we're back to the underlying question, which is, what is the nature of the complaint? So let's say it's a codes complaint. That's really, I would categorize that as being more in the nature of a civil action. I know it goes to the DA's office when you do a codes violation, but it's kind of more the nature of a civil remedy in terms of what ultimately happens in my mind. And I think the codes enforcement officer, is kind of playing the role, you might, by analogy, you might say, of a police officer, right? So you're looking for sort of probable cause. Is it more likely than not that this has occurred at this location? And I think evidence like that is evidence. And the codes enforcement officer could consider that evidence, I think, in determining whether or not they should cite the owner of that property for a violation of this new pretend fireworks ordinance. And if they do, then, it'll show up maybe in our new environmental court. That judge is well equipped at that point maybe to handle these kinds of things because he's got a docket, let's say once a month, or she, once a month or once every 2 weeks. It's got nothing but codes type matters on it and pause cases. So they know exactly what's coming. They're familiar with the process. They know what the outcomes are. That starts to look like a process that might be much more functioning to me than where we are right now. But anyway, that your question is, would that be evidence? And I think the answer is yes. That can be evidence. Would it carry the day if the other side shows up and says, I was in Florida and here's my alibi? I don't know. But I think it is. I do think it is evidence.
Okay. All right.
If we basically, though, have something on the books that has times, dates, and whatever, you can do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
Those who normally pay attention to that, it could regulate those individuals, say, hey, don't do this, we'll not do this.
Yep.
Those who are going to go ahead and break the law are going to go ahead and break the law. This will basically, though, might limit the amount of what we have.
Right.
And protect us in that situation. I mean, it's just like if we got hunting regulations, there are those that are going to go out there and hunt.
Agreed.
We've got speed signs up and down the road. There are those that are going to go past those signs. We've got stop signs. People are going to run the stop signs. But yet we have the rules and the regulations there that those who are law abiding are going to pay attention to. So it keeps that number down. So if we have something on the books that regulate, our number could be decreased.
Right.
And I think that's positive.
Also, and I agree with you, Commissioner Reed, it occurred to me when I was hearing this earlier, I think just about every year, right around the 4th of July, the D&J does an article saying what you can do when. So just that, having that rule and it being published, I don't know what the circulation of the D&J is, but having that propagated may help some, getting it out there, and may have that indirect reduction that you want just by being able to use that speaking point.
Yeah. Good.
Did you want to talk?
But let me just make this one comment. But anything we change in our ordinance has to go before the county commission, correct?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Let me just remind everyone, no matter what we think, and no matter how many hours we spend on this thing, if the county commission says no, we've wasted a lot of time and effort. I would thoroughly suggest, Mike, that we take this before the county commission and let them know that there's that the planning commission wants to address the subject, but we don't want to waste a lot of our time and money and efforts in doing that. And would they be receptive to hearing that? You've got one neighbor in your district, and there are a number of other county commissioners that may have hundreds of people that don't want things changed. And that's usually what happens when we take something before the county commission. We've addressed something that we think is an issue, and people out there don't think it's an issue and don't want it changed. So I would suggest that somehow, some way, we get the commission involved on the front end of this as it relates to what we're anticipating or even wanting to explore. That way they will know what's coming, and it won't have to be explained over and over and over again to those guys. I would think that anything that we do is going to have to be done again at the county commission, and I'd like for those guys to know we're looking at this. And there's a real possibility that the planning commission would make some changes to our ordinance, and just want input from back. Is this something that the county commission wants the planning commission to address? So I would suggest that we get on the agenda of a county commission meeting and make a 10-minute presentation as to what the planning commission is wanting to do or going to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think the easiest sale we're gonna have is no shooting fireworks after midnight. All this other we've been talking about, there's a lot of pushback. You're gonna have a lot of pushback. I can see that.
You are. We are.
Yeah. It's gonna be a lot.
You're talking about even on the suggested time for the limited time from July 3rd, 4th, 5th, and
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, he's talking about the sale. He says Amazon ships in here. How do we stop Amazon from shipping it in here at those times? I think through the year you do have a small amount out of my way. Somebody has a birthday party like you talk about. It would like the chief was talking about. It wouldn't be a pyro guy coming there doing it. It'd be a family doing it in their yard, birthday party. Could be a pushback on that. But I think the biggest part is the shooting is through the holidays, Christmas, New Year's, and the 4th of July. And other than that, I'm not in subdivision, but I don't see a lot of that. And I know and shooting the mortars, the big ones, that's what people buy. That's what they want. That puts on a show.
big and loud.
Big and loud. And just gonna be a lot of pushback on that. That's what I buy. That's what I buy.
Yeah.
I wouldn't buy. I don't buy sparklers. I buy the stuff that works.
Yeah, but
I'm the problem, and 2/3 of this county is the problem. At least the problem.
I like them too.
But I know, but let me make sure I understand. If you were doing that May 15th, you'd have a problem with it.
I would, but I this neighbor, he's got a bad problem.
Yeah.
He does. He does.
He and others. It's just not just one person.
I'm sure. But if we start with the time, they can't shoot them after midnight. He's got them all night long, I think.
He's got them all summer long.
Yeah. That you can only have a yard sale twice a year or something, can't you? I mean, if you continue, I don't know how we put some teeth in that. You can't shoot them every night in your yard, but that's something. It wasn't too muddy till Josh got up, and he's sort of muddy. Real big there.
Okay.
Josh,
That's his job.
don't mean to interrupt your conversation, but we're talking about the possibility of getting the county commission involved on this in the front end and let them know what we're discussing. What's the appropriate channel to do that? Would it be go before the steering committee, or would it just be to inform the full commission at a meeting what the planning commission is?
I think two ways. One would be you could get on the steering committee agenda and make a short presentation there, which could then get brought up at the full commission level. Or there's always the other business aspect of the county commission agenda. Sometimes Mayor Burgess will add specific items under other business at the end, and you could just get a placeholder there and make a short presentation. I think either way, because you're not really asking for action, you're just informing. So I think you could do that in either method would be appropriate.
Okay. What I would really want is some feedback from the commission that they want this planning commission to proceed with that process. We've spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars with a project. The traffic shed project comes to mind, and spent countless hours. And then when it got right down to it, the county commission did not want to address that program. And I'm gun shy about doing things that I consider kind of major in the county, and this is not a minor situation when it comes to neighbors like you've got complaining, Mike. So I would just want the county commission to say, yeah, go ahead and take a look at it, and then bring us what you've got and see. We can work through the legal department, we can work through their committee process, we can do whatever needs to be done, but I don't want to waste staff's time, and I don't want to waste our time if the county commission says, I'm not going to make a change, or I don't want you to take a look at it. So I'd want some feedback from them. It may be good to take it to the, to both of them, and go to the steering committee and then say we're going to bring it up at the county commission, even if it's under the planning end of it, and just communicate with those guys and just let them have something to be thinking about too. So I know there's going to be some pushback. I know there's going to be pushback, and then we can get as many folks involved in this process as we can, fire department, even the sheriff's department, to get someone helping us get involved in that process. So I think if we go about it, let's go about it in a very organized manner so that, once again, we're not wasting staff's time and our time and even the county commission's time by moving forward with the thing, okay?
One last question. In terms of the gunfire, from the noise ordinance aside, is that a public safety committee kind of?
Mike, it might be. Let's just say fireworks. When I said let's take these things one at a time, let's take fireworks. I think the gun issue is an entirely different issue. You're going to bring up Second Amendment rights and all kinds of stuff by a bunch of folks. I don't think firing fireworks is a Second Amendment right, and I think that's something that we can address. And it might be under a noise ordinance or something like that, but I don't want to get us involved in those two things coming together. The fireworks, if we're done with that, let's move on to the guns. But what I recommend, and if it's okay with this commission, what I would recommend is that we have Vice Chair Cush make a presentation before the next steering committee meeting and then the next county commission meeting, which will both come within a couple of weeks, and let them know what we've got, what we're considering, and ask for input back from those guys. They can give input if they want to, they don't have to if they don't want to, but we're asking for your input because we are planning to spend a good deal of time and effort on this. Is this something you guys are okay and want us to pursue and look at? And let's just see what happens there. Josh, does that sound reasonable?
All right, Josh, and Jeff, I'll ask the question again, because I know that the gun issue and it's not really a gun issue, it's the firing of it's the discharge of the guns that's the issue. And I know that and the fireworks are two different deals, but to me, they can go on concurrently, and whether we chat about it at the same time, it's different. I'm going to continue to work behind the scenes with codes and whatever other committee I need to do to keep pushing that. So I guess my question to Josh and to you again is, do you guys think the discharge of firearms does that fight need to be in public safety? I know it's not planning, other than the noise part, but where does that fight lie? What department or committee, county committee, do you think that lies? Do you have any idea?
No, that's the reason I want
David,
to
do you have any idea?
Well, right now, we do have ordinance on firing of a firearm.
It's illegal to discharge a firearm in a major subdivision.
It's illegal to fire or discharge a firearm in a major subdivision.
Right, and that's a county ordinance.
Yeah.
And where did that? Who drafted that? Did this department draft that?
No,
committee?
it came through ordinance that was adopted by the full county commission. It's not in our zoning ordinance.
Correct.
It's just a
It's what you're calling the noise ordinance.
Yeah, the noise ordinance is a freestanding ordinance separate from the zoning. It
Freestanding
didn't come
ordinance.
through us.
Okay.
It dates back, Mike, to it really predates me.
Okay.
Not coming
That
down.
was the guy.
It's about, like, I think it's maybe a 3 or 4. It's pretty old.
Okay.
07.
How you gonna tell somebody
And,
that's got
I don't
5 or 10 acres that they can't file dirt on their property?
I don't think that's the issue. I think it's a subdivision.
It started,
If you own less than 2 acres.
it started with, noise complaints.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, I know.
And firearms was put into the noise ordinance also.
Right, right.
So, Mike, you might take it to criminal committee. It's embedded in that noise.
I stood on my front porch and yelled at my neighbor to quit shooting.
He started shooting at you?
No.
You haven't
They
used
start,
one,
they
so-
start
all right.
shooting and called me and said,
Hey,
Like,
first, you're leaving?
I need to throw this out there.
Sure.
If you tie the firearms to the fireworks, I think it would be suicide for the fireworks bill. I don't think that they're going to adopt them together
yeah.
because you're going to open up this can of worms with people that say, I've lived here on my farm for 40 years and it was my daddy's farm and we fired guns just like my daddy fired guns and we're keeping all the bullets on the property. We're not creating reckless endangerment of any other people around here. So I'm gonna shoot my guns and I have a Second Amendment right to do that. I think you're gonna lose the fireworks battle if you try to do them concurrently.
I'm in agreement. What I'm also trying to do is to protect everybody's rights, like Phil's and mine and yours, that, you know what, a projectile can travel a mile. And we got crazy people out there shooting guns that don't really care about where the end of that round
But
lands.
I think you already have laws about reckless endangerment and bullets leaving your property and that sort of thing. And I don't think you need.
But our problem is what we talked about a minute ago is enforcement. That's where the problem lies. And if nothing else, I want to figure out. I want to jump up and down and say, we need who's enforcing this, because right now we're not even sure if it's codes or if it's the sheriff's department, and if it's codes, they're understaffed because at 5 o'clock they go home, and most of this stuff happens in the evening or after midnight, and like my mama told me, nothing good happens after midnight, right? So these people can't respond because they go home at 5. So what do they need? Do they need to ask Mayor Burgess for 4 more people on their budget this year and arm these people with the ability to go out and write citations, and or do we shift the power like Josh was? Do we shift the power to the sheriff's department? Somebody tell me. Somebody tell me who. Otherwise, it's a free for all. It's a free for all out there.
Mike, can we let Josh review all that process and see what really stands as it relates to the ordinance against discharging firearms in a major or chartered or registered subdivision? Can you do that, Josh? Is that a law or an ordinance, and what needs to and can be done about that? If it's a law, it's one thing. If it's an ordinance, it's another thing. Can you do that research and come back to us and let us know what you find out? If there's a law against discharging a firearm in a subdivision, we don't even need to discuss it. The guy's got all the teeth he needs. But if it's not, if it's an ordinance and it comes down to enforcement, that's when I think we need to.
Right, and then, and I think Phil would agree, the problem is, okay, his issue is he lives 50 feet, he lives in a major subdivision. The problem is the shots are coming from outside the major subdivision. So it puts he and his family and that whole neighborhood in harm's way. So how do you control that? So how can you pass a legislation, or how do you put teeth into that aspect?
Well, I do know for a fact that the sheriff's office on a regular basis answers calls for people calling in complaining of gunshot fires, and the deputy goes out and surveys who's shooting, what they're shooting, and what's surrounding there. I do know they answer those type calls, so I would assume that they also see what they're shooting in, or if they have a berm that they're shooting into. But I do know they answer several calls, because I hear it all the time, them going out on those type calls, people complaining about gunshot fires. So on that right there, I'll probably interview the sheriff and just see what their process is and how they handle that. Just be my suggestion.
You could do that, couldn't you, Josh? You could do all that for us. I think that's an issue that there may be something there already, that deals with it.
Can I add one thing? We
You
do
can
have
add
a
anything
noise
you want.
ordinance in place that was adopted
We
in 2006.
keep interrupting you and making you sit down. I'm sorry.
Tanya, hold on.
Okay.
I'm gonna interrupt you one more time. Everybody, thank you for staying the extra hour that I've put you through. But this is important to everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been 10 years since we've kind of updated this noise ordinance, so I appreciate everybody's patience. So thank you.
So the noise ordinance that we currently have adopted addresses noise only. We don't address gun safety, where it goes,
Right.
where the bullet lands. We can't. We don't have that authority to address that kind of stuff. Mike and I drafted a new noise ordinance that has been through Josh and through the mayor a couple of times, and it's been through a couple of drafts. And we are reluctant to hastily push something that we feel is unenforceable pending what Doug was talking about, our environmental court. So that's why we're still working on it. It's still being modified and changed up a little bit to try and make it as enforceable as we possibly can. But again, it just addresses the noise. It does not address unsafe gunfire, or it is just a noise ordinance. And I separated the noise ordinance from the fireworks because it just is a whole different ballgame. And I have talked to Sheriff Fitzhugh, and the Sheriff's Department cannot enforce a local ordinance because it's not at state level, it's local. So it's up to us to enforce it. And we go home at 4:30, and we have talked to Josh, like Josh mentioned, about using a sheriff's report as validation of a complaint, and then going from there. And that's still, we're still talking about that. We haven't finalized it yet. So that's where we are with the ordinance.
So on that last part, who can say, yes, that's okay to do? And as far as somebody calls, sheriff goes and responds, he takes notes, sees that there's a violation, even though he can't write a citation because he's a sheriff, because it's a county ordinance. He then sends you the paperwork the next day. Then a codes officer goes out and says, hey, I've got this report from the sheriff's department, says you did this, that's a violation. You either issue a warning or you issue a citation, right?
Typically a citation, yes.
What are we waiting on to say, yes, we can do that?
Well, that's why I wanted Josh to address you on the legal aspects of it. Currently, the sheriff can't enforce it, and we can't enforce it using a sheriff's report. And I would say, and Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say ultimately it would come down to the judge. Even if we were to take a police report to the judge, it's going to be up to him whether he accepts that as proof that there was a violation in the first place. Currently, that's the way it is.
So it's not a matter it's not a legal matter, it's up to the eyes of the judge whether.
So yes, kind of, but I also think we're mixing a couple of things up. In my view, before the codes department should rely on a sheriff's report as evidence of a violation, our ordinance needs to identify a sheriff's report as being one of the pieces of information that the codes department might rely on for a violation. So right now it does not say that. So historically, when David and I were dealing with these things, and you'd have somebody complain, so I hate to derail this for a minute, but this is I remember conversations like this. You have somebody who calls and says, every morning at 3 in the morning, my neighbor's dumpster people come and empty the dumpsters. And it's super loud, and it's every morning, and it's a codes violation. Well, it could be a violation of the noise ordinance because there were decibel amounts in the noise ordinance. So in theory, is emptying a dumpster or dumpsters at 3 in the morning a violation of the noise ordinance? It might be. But how does David ever realistically enforce that? Because he's got to get a decibel read. Well, he's got to be there at 3 in the morning at the property site to get the. Okay, so there's the problem. What evidence is needed? All right. So in a similar way, if we're going to start relying on a new piece of evidence on a regular basis, I think that the ordinance needs to say something like noise violations may be supported by various pieces of information deemed appropriate by the Codes Department, including but not limited to, number one, a report from the Sheriff's Office evidencing the events occurring at the property in question, blah, 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 blah. Number two, a decibel reading. Number three, visual inspection and witness interviews. Number four, let's say what those things are. That way, when the Codes Department has that kind of information and cites somebody, they're not immediately gutted because they're using a piece of information that no one thought was within the scope of reasonable to support a violation. So to me, that's step one if we're going to start using sheriff's reports. The second thing is we need to be sure the sheriff's office, we're not asking, I don't think, I'm trampling all over everybody's feet here. In my mind, we're not asking the sheriff's office to enforce the noise ordinance because they can't, they won't. What we're asking them is when somebody calls, when he calls and says they're doing XYZ, please come check on this gunshots, and then they complete a report, would they be willing to send that to the Codes Department as a piece of information the Codes Department now has to support a possible violation? You, Sheriff, are not enforcing the ordinance, but you are sharing your report with us, which we may independently use as part of our chain of evidence. That's kind of the way I'm thinking about this.
And also,
I think we'll get pushback from the sheriff's office if we say anything that suggests they're enforcing the noise ordinance or the fireworks ordinance. I suspect we get pushback on that because it isn't. Going back to what I started out saying, I don't think we have the authority to create a new crime. And so they're in the business of enforcing those state statutes, and I don't think they're going to enforce our county ordinance, generally speaking. They might be willing to respond to those calls and provide the reports for us.
And the environmental court sees this a lot better than the general sessions court.
Right.
So that's what they're working towards, is an environmental court judge to hear the related ordinance violation cases.
Does that answer?
We're dropping like flies. Mike, pretty soon it's only going to be you here if we don't move on.
all right. So
here's
to sum. Yeah, go ahead and sum up.
Let me see if I can sum up, and then correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, the fireworks ordinance we're going to take before the county commission at the next steering committee meeting, and we would like for you to spearhead that, and also before the next county commission meeting. So we'll ask to be put on the agenda of that committee and that commission, and then we'll try to get some feedback and then decide this commission where we go from there. And as Doug said, we're still early in the year, but probably too late to put some stuff together hurriedly and not violate some ethical process as it relates to fireworks this summer, especially this summer.
Talking about for the sale of fireworks.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
But let's just see where we go with the county commission. The guns, I'm not sure if this should even be addressed here or addressed at the county commission level. If we're talking about an ordinance, I'm not sure. I'm just not sure. So what I think we ought to do is to allow Josh to come back to our next meeting, whichever one is March the 12th at 6 p.m. at the courthouse, and let us know what you find on guns and discharging of guns, if it's a law or an ordinance, and then what our next procedure may be to be able to better control what goes on in the county. I'm going to say I had the impression that guns were being discharged in essence in a neighborhood.
Some are.
A subdivision. But if it's in property adjacent to subdivisions, you guys are probably, we are going to probably be faced with something that I don't know that you can enforce. Let's just say this firearm that was discharged and whizzed by your head, you filed a civil complaint, a lawsuit. I'm not 100% sure what the outcome of that would be, but it could be an endangerment process. Let's just say that gun that was discharged hit you right between the eyes and you're no longer with us. What's the difference in the two? You almost got shot or you got shot, but that may be criminal. One may be criminal and the other may be civil. So those are the processes that I'd just like for Josh to review and consider as much of that stuff, and then see where we as a county need to go, whether it's this commission or the county commission, and the best way to proceed on that. We are growing up, but every single solitary month when we are considering doing something out in the county right now, we have objections to neighbors saying, I moved out here for the peace and quiet. I moved out here for the peace and quiet. We don't want this in our neighborhood. And the experience in me wants to yell. There is no longer, I moved out to get peace and quiet, because that out right now I don't think exists. And those neighborhoods that have been historically residential are going to have to move over for some commercial and industrial developments. Where is all these people and where are all of these new businesses going to go? So things are changing, and we need to consider changing in the way we've always done things, whether it's discharge of firearms or fireworks or anything else. So all of this is appropriate in my mind, but we just need to make sure we go about it in the right way. And we have the support of the governing body to make sure that we're not overstepping our bounds or trying to address something that they have no interest in. You take someone who has a farm. If you guys remember the noise ordinance, those of you that have been around that long, we had a lot of support for neighborhoods. But then you take someone that says, I've owned this farm for 100 years. My family's owned this farm for 100 years. You can't enforce an ordinance on me. I've got the right to drive a tractor. I've got the right to do that. And they are 100% correct. They have the right to do that. So what if it were a 50-acre farm next to that subdivision? And that's my big concern, and that's what I want Josh to try to address. Can we do anything? I'm not sure we can, but we need to have, in my mind, a really good view of what we can do and what we can't do. And I know Josh, and although he might not have been what he thought was prepared today, I think he did a great job, but I know he'll be more than prepared in 2 weeks when we meet. Won't you, Josh?
Yes, sir.
Does that sum it up, Mike? Anything we need to add? And if I can, Mr. Boykin, if I can commend you for leaning on your county commissioner. You'd be surprised as to how many people out in the county have no idea who their county commissioner is, and you've gone about it in the right way, and Mike has gone about it in the right way, starting at a level that can create additional conversations. So you're to be commended for your approach to the process. And just let me go ahead and say that sometimes we don't get everything we want, but you're not going to get anything unless you ask. So good job in bringing it up. Are we done?
I've got about 3 or 4 more things I need to talk about. No, I'm kidding.
Is anybody going to wait around for?
I'm kidding. I'm
Motion denied, right?
What we're discussing about a gun order.
Thank you. Our once again, our next meeting is on the 12th at 6 p.m. In the courthouse. We're adjourned.